from the introduction of his book. In the introduction, Perry says there is an old native North American Indian tradition called heyoka. The heyokas, or sacred clowns, were people within the tribe who did things differently, challenged people's thinking, shook them up. Their function was to keep their people from getting stuck in rigid ways of thinking and living. They were also known as contraries because they lived backwards. They walked backward, danced backward. Everything they did was contrary to the norm. By their living, they symbolized the shadow of the Creator God, reminding people of their spiritual center. For gay people, the role of heyoka is especially important. Not only are heyokas often gay, the role of contrary is a sacred symbol of the role we play among society as a whole. Not long ago, a handsome, courageous, young gay Indian named Richard danced heyoka at a powwow. When I heard about it, shivers ran down my spine. It was a sign of remembering. It was a sign that we are remembering our relation to the Great Spirit and that the Creator God is remembering us. His dance also made me realize that from the beginning there has been a heyoka response to AIDS. When the normal response was to react with fear and panic, there were people dancing backward, responding with love and confidence. When every day the world began repeating a death mantra, our sacred clowns danced the dance of life. They talked about living with AIDS, surviving, healing, recovering. When the normal reaction to a diagnosis was isolation, our heyokas dragged us into a community. When the world wanted us to be victims, they drew circles of light around themselves and stood in their power. Whenever it got dark, they turned toward the light. Whenever people said there is no hope, they said there is always hope. Whenever people said this isn't about us, they stood up and said this is about you. This is about us all. Our planet is sick. Earth has acquired an immune dysfunction. We are all living with AIDS. The heart of this book is inspired by that magical AIDS community of sacred clowns, the contrary people who keep hope alive, who stay spirit-centered, who do things differently. Perry Tilleros. And I would add that those of us gathered here adhere to that sentiment. I thank you all for joining us, for marching with us. We're not only marching in memory of all the people we've lost, we're marching with all the people who have marched over the last 19 years. The journey used to be quite longer. Back in 1994, when Mayor Giuliani sought to dismantle the Division of AIDS Services and seemed to be making war against homeless people with AIDS, Housing Works began its vigil and called on a coalition of groups to support this vigil down at City Hall. And so in solidarity, we changed this march that originally started at Madison Square and ended at Washington Square with a rally. And we began with a rally in Washington Square and marched all the way to City Hall. Well over 10 years of marching to City Hall, a much longer distance, and quite arduous in many ways, because after we would cross Canal Street, it was quite a desolate march. It felt very insulary. we would only be with ourselves and our police escort. And I believe the spirits of the people that we remembered, they would also often carry us that long distance, that dark distance, until we got to City Hall. And what pulled us forward was knowing we were bringing support to those folks who've been holding vigil for well over 20 hours at that point. The numbers diminished year after year in our journey to City Hall, and so we changed the course. But now this is now the third year we're marching on the Upper West Side, the third year we're marching here from Trinity. It's good to march to this gathering. Let's take a moment and just call out a few names of those that we know who've passed from AIDS and who we'll be marching for, and then let's begin our march.